I'm Pat Dooris. Welcome to the story. It's the day before the 4th of July, so stick around for the end of the show because we're going to go back in time to a big fireworks show from Fort Vancouver. We're also going to talk about wildfires, and we'll hear the latest from Matt Zafino on what's going on with fire weather. But first, we're going to hear from Portland's retiring fire chief, Sara Boone. She's fascinating, and she has a fascinating story to tell. So it's our big story tonight. Sara Boone is a real pioneer, the first black woman ever hired by the Portland Fire Bureau 28 years ago. She rose through the ranks to become the first black fire chief just 4 years ago. And now she is just days away from retirement. She's kind of shy when it comes to the press and often avoids reporters when she can. But recently, she was kind enough to meet me downtown at Fire Station 1. She agreed to sit down and talk through her career and her approaching retirement. I think our conversation's remarkable. It's a fascinating look behind the scenes at what it's like for her. She said the approaching retirement is kind of bittersweet, bitter because it's always hard to say goodbye to a place that you care deeply about, but also sweet because she will finally be able to take off the heavy burden of responsibility that she's been carrying around since her very first promotion.
So that first level, that first supervisory level, is when people feel the weight and the responsibility of holding somebody's life in their hands. And then the decisions that you make can either change the outcome, not only for the public, but also for the people within your crew. And it just compounds as you go up the ladder. It compounds when you become a captain, because your responsibility is for everybody within that station, as well as that fire management area. It compounds when you become a battalion chief, because now it's everybody within that district and all the stations that make up that battalion. So with every level, the expansion of worry and the weight of it grows. So that's what I'll say when you coming back to your question of the weight of a fire chief. It's not the last 4 years. It's every day that I've been in position that I can send people into harm's way. So instead of 2 people, it's 756. And that is a heavy weight to carry.
Yeah. Does it feel like a physical weight sometimes?
Yeah, well, it's emotional, it's psychological, and it's not just, you rise and fall with the successes and the failures. You take it all. And you also know that when you make decisions, and not just on life or death, but when you make decisions, you're never going to make everybody happy, right? And so it's one of those things. I think you try to compartmentalize and just focus on the work and the business, but as a human being, you're also emotional and you're a sponge and you absorb, whether it's you didn't make the right decision, or maybe this initiative didn't go the right way, or maybe your budget is, beyond what it should be. There's always going to be negative backlash. So I will just say that's, it's not a physical weight, but it's also just another interjection that when it comes to the psychology and the emotion of everything that you are internalizing and processing. I guess it is a weight that's not the physical, but it is a lot.
When Sara Boone joined the Portland Fire Bureau back in 1995, she was the only African-American woman in the Bureau and just one of 5 women serving at the time. She said there was no overt discrimination aimed at her, but still, she could tell sometimes the public and fellow firefighters were uncomfortable around her.
Or we just don't know what to say, right? And so again, I think that's the same thing. And when we go out, and we serve over, 600,000 people, not everybody's going to have the same experience. People are going to be socialized in different ways. People probably don't even know that they're consciously being racist or sexist or whatnot. But the fact is, if you don't start having those conversations and leveling the playing field to where you're not coming from a place of fear, but you're coming from a place of, seeing somebody's experience through a different lens, and then also validating who they are because of those experiences.
More of an empathetic sort of.
Empathetic, but to say, here's what it's like for me to have a lived experience, not only as a female, but as a Black female in these environments, in this arena. And usually what people do is they center and say, well, I don't see that. And it's like, well, of course you don't see it. You have to experience it. Well, you're never going to experience that as a white male, right? It's those, whether it's hidden cues, whether it's shunning, whether it's subtle things, right? Those are on such a level that may be unseen by everybody else, but acutely felt, because you know what racism feels like. You know what misogyny feels like.
She'd grown up in Portland and was a star athlete in high school and college. She was working as a high school teacher when she met someone from the Fire Bureau and was intrigued. As she looked into it more, she got hooked, and then she had to fit in.
So just worked exceptionally hard, found the best firefighters, and it's just like an athlete. You know, you're not, you either can put your time on the court, but it really is the things that you're doing on the weekends, on the days off, the extra things that people don't see in order to improve your outcomes. It's not just limited to when you clock in and when you clock out.
I remember you once told me when I was asking about other people in your life, and you said, I pretty much married the fire department.
Yeah.
You were that committed, that dedicated.
Yeah, at the time, because you just didn't know, could you do both?
Yeah.
Right? Or could you do both well? And so I guess that's kind of, you know, how my brain processes, which isn't always that great, is finding that balance and stability. Is, you know, other people, it works for them. It really does. I mean, it's a challenge, but women have now come into the department and serve in the fire service and are trying to figure out how to balance being a mother, being a partner, and also 100% all in their career. And they're, you know, that's management and working with your partner and time frame, all of those things.
Was it worth it for you?
Was it worth it for me to give up
being that single focused, maybe giving up a partner, giving up a family?
I mean, I think a couple of things. I mean, I don't want to get too personal.
You can if you want.
But I think for, you know, everybody has their own path to walk, and you never know what the future is going to hold. But I think for me, again, and how I process and how I, just the cards that I was dealt, it felt like for you to really excel at what resonates with your heart, it is married to this job. If I had that stronger pull when it came to, I really wish I had a family, and I've had that like in my 30s, but it wasn't as strong as this is what I'm dedicated to. I don't know why. It's just the way I was wired and what I chose, and what I could handle.
Chief Boone has experienced many ups and downs over her career. She's looking forward to retirement and a chance to unpack many of the bits of trauma that she's picked up along the way.
But again, it gets back to that emotion and what you're stuffing down. And it impacts families, right? Sure. It impacts your health.
And then, since we were talking in a working fire station, a call came in for one of the big trucks.
So Pat, what I was saying, being able to step out, letting your guard down, not being so, where you're not really addressing the trauma that you have seen over 28 years, or things that really impact just your overall health. It will be nice to step away and then give yourself some space and start, whether it's going to counseling, whether it's going out and enjoying the activities you used to enjoy when you were younger and had the time, or maybe it's enjoying pursuing relationships that you couldn't pursue when, I was dedicated to the job. And also it's just getting in touch with the sides of you that you didn't have a chance to explore, whether it's being creative, whether it's art, whether it's music, whether all of those things get put on the back burner.
But not for much longer. The chief's last day in office is July 12th. So what are your thoughts on the retirement of Chief Sara Boone? Send them our way, will you? The email address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail. The number is 503-226-5090. We're off tomorrow night, but when we return on Wednesday, we'll delve into a controversial part of the Fire Bureau, Portland street response. It's had, shall we say, a complicated relationship with the Bureau. We'll talk with Chief Boone about the behind-the-scenes problems facing Portland street response and its possible future. I hope you'll join us Wednesday at 6 o'clock for that discussion, or be sure to find it online on our KGW YouTube page. Coming up next right now on The Story, wildfire season is certainly here. Right now, a fire is burning in Skamania County right on the bank of the Columbia River. Chief Meteorologist Matt Zaffino will join us after the break to talk fire weather and the heat in the metro area this week. It all happens when The Story returns. The Tunnel 5 fire in Skamania County is now more than 530 acres in size and has destroyed several structures so far. We were earlier told that included 10 homes, but now fire officials say that was just a rough estimate and they're working to confirm that. The fire is 5% contained and is threatening at least 250 additional homes. There are level 3 evacuations in place in a 2-mile radius around the blaze. That means go now. It started Sunday morning around 11 o'clock and grew fairly quickly because of the hot, windy conditions. It's just across the river from Hood River, and many people are gathering on the Oregon side of the Columbia to get a look at the fire and the smoke on the Washington side. Chief Meteorologist Matt Zaffino joins us now. And Matt, we know the warm temperatures are not good when it comes to wildfire, but how are the winds behaving over the next few days?
You know, they're not bad right now, Pat, but they're going to get a little bit gustier in areas tomorrow. And then later in the week, when the west wind returns, that's when the fire, the tunnel brush, the fire near Underwood is going to experience its strongest winds. 93 in the Dalles right now. Look at that humidity at just 11%. Oof. So it's not just that the air is dry, but what that's doing is drying out the fuels, and they all dry out at different rates depending on what we're talking about. And by fuel, I mean brush, twigs, weeds, trees, all of that. That's all fuel for a fire, of course. So the winds are really light in the Dalles right now. That's good news. In the Portland area, they're all out of the north and northwest. Let's look at the gorge. Hood River, northwest at only 6 miles an hour. Now, keep in mind, that's up at the airport. Along the river, it's a little bit stronger as it typically is, but it's still onshore. We are going to see a wind reversal happen really tomorrow and tomorrow night. And in a way, that's a benefit because when you see a switch in the wind direction, the winds will often go calm for a little while. And then when we get the east winds, and that's the switch from onshore flow to east winds and offshore flow, when we get that switch, the stronger east winds will be west of where the Tunnel 5 fire is burning right now. So let's look at our wind forecast here. Here's Carson, here's Hood River. The fire is burning right in here to the north and just a little bit to the west of Hood River, right in there. So notice where the darker, the more, vibrant colors are, the reds, where we're getting the strongest winds. It's all down the gorge from where this fire is burning. That's the east wind tomorrow, and it goes a little bit northerly as well. So it's not a super strong east wind event. And it continues to blow into Wednesday, and the strongest winds again are downriver from where this fire is burning. So they will not experience the strongest winds from this east wind event. And then when the wind switches late Wednesday and into Thursday, that's when they're going to get some strong winds. But again, because the fire is has been getting pushed to the west and now to the east from the west wind, now it's going to get pushed back to the west with the east wind. When the wind switches again, it may push the flames over areas that are already burned. So that's the potential other benefit of getting the switch in the winds, is that it may just flames going on to places that are already burned. Doesn't have much fuel to work with there, so that can be good too. There is a fire weather warning out for Skamania County, the eastern parts of Clark County, and the western parts of Klickitat County, but only on the Washington side of the river. We don't have it on the Oregon side of the river because our fuels are a little bit better, and we haven't seen the fire start here too. So we'll keep a close eye on that, but it is interesting how this warning is broken down by the Columbia River, and they are under the red flag warning where that fire is burning right now, Pat. So that's interesting.
Okay, so here's my question, though. Why does the wind get worse past the fire? On the west side of the fire? Is it because of the geography there?
Yes, it has nothing to do with the fire itself. Typically, when we have a strong west wind, the windiest areas are where that cooler air from the west is pushing through the gap in the Cascades, known as the Columbia River Gorge, and then spreading out into the hot areas of the Central Gorge and then over to the east. When it's an east wind, it's the opposite. The wind is coming through here, and it really accelerates as it gets down through that funnel that is the Columbia River Gorge. And typically in Hood River, you don't get the super strong east winds. You get east winds, but the really strong winds are typically downwind or west of Hood River out towards Troutdale when we get the east winds. So that's all about the geography itself, not about this particular fire.
Interesting. And the fuels we know are probably pretty dry, the grasslands and the twigs and the brush that you mentioned. So fingers crossed that nothing pops up west of this original fire, yeah?
And that's two key points there, and you're really getting into the weeds, pun intended, because weeds are a fuel. But what the fire managers look at, they kind of categorize different fuels. So grasses, weeds, that kind of thing. Those are quick burning, flashy fuels. They burn out in about an hour typically. So those are like 1 hour fuels. Then you get into heavier fuels, and they can last 10 hours, even 100 hours, and those are bigger vegetation. Trees would be 100-hour fuels. they're still benefiting from that rain we got back in the middle of June, so they're not that dry yet. We're beginning to see them dry out, but the heavier fuels still fairly moist from the rain we had back in mid-June. The lighter stuff is already dried out, and that's why we look at the fuels that way. And the other key point you brought up is ignition. The fire weather warnings aren't that a fire is going to start. It's if a fire starts. If you get ignition, we could see critical or dangerous fire weather behavior, and that is a concern wherever those winds are blowing and we get the hot weather.
Yeah, so please be careful with the fireworks out there.
Big time.
Great context, Matt. Thank you very much. Coming up next on The Story, we're going into the KGW vault to dig up a fireworks spectacular from the mid-90s. Remember those? With no show for us tomorrow, tonight is the night. We'll see some familiar faces and relive quite the show from that night when The Story returns. We mentioned it after our big story earlier today, but we do not have a show for tomorrow night due to the 4th of July holiday. Hopefully you'll be outside looking at the sky. So let's do a little celebrating today. And a viewer named Hal in Beaverton is to thanks for this. He gave us a great idea. Hal wrote and said, I ran across a VHS tape of your coverage of the 1995 4th of July fireworks of Vancouver. It was a very elaborate production with multiple camera locations and helicopter views. Maybe you can replay parts of it for today's audience. I'm guessing you have a nice archived version of the show in your video vault. Well, turns out we had to do a little bit of digging, but yeah, we found it. And back in '95, the fireworks show was known as the largest fireworks spectacular west of the Mississippi. Came from Fort Vancouver. I was part of the coverage up in the helicopter, and what fun that was. Before we get too far into it, though, we do want to warn those of you who are sensitive to flashing lights. This segment has a lot of that. Here's some of that fireworks spectacular from nearly 30 years ago, rediscovered in the KGW vault.
Now, for the first time on TV, KGW Northwest News Channel 8 presents the Fort Vancouver Fireworks Spectacular with Carol Jensen and Jim Benneman. Presented by Fred Meyer, Les Schwab Tires, and Northwest News Channel 8.
Good evening, I'm Carol Jensen.
I'm Jim Benneman. Hello, everyone. Coming to you live from Fort Vancouver as you look at that splendid view looking down from Sky 8. What a vantage point Kim Ragnoni, our pilot's got tonight. One of the best views in the house, coming to you live, as we say, from Fort Vancouver. Carol, you know, people talk about fireworks shows, but this one the Fort Vancouver Fireworks Spectacular, the biggest this side of the Mississippi.
Can you believe that? And I think from taking a look at those pictures just a moment ago, we do in fact believe it. You know, this program didn't come together overnight. It is actually a year-long culmination of work by hundreds of volunteers. And it all started, believe it or not, about 33 years ago, but this is the first time that it's ever been televised. Let's go check in with Pat Dooris now. He is high above us in Sky 8. Pat, I don't imagine there's much of a traffic problem right now, is there?
Hey, Carol, it is a great view up here. You just can't believe it. We're going to show you the view from Sky 8. You're looking out across the river and onto the other side of Marine Drive, where the police had warned that there may be problems earlier. And in fact, as we were taking off about 15 minutes ago, while it was still light, we could see it was bumper to bumper on both sides of the road there, and the police were patrolling it. So if you have any thoughts of getting out there late, I'd forget about it, because the traffic really is intense. We're going to be hanging up here all night long. It's really hard to describe just how cool it is to see all the little neighborhood fireworks going off below us, and we'll also show you some of the big ones as they go off during the show. But right now, back to you guys.
What memories. I know not everybody's a fan, but I love that stuff. Hey, that's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. But remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. Stick around now for the news at 6:30. And remember, we do not have a show for you tomorrow, but I'll see you right back here on Wednesday.